All righty. Yeah, my background and experience is in data. I started off a long time ago. I've been working for Mutual now for about 24 years. And originally I started off delivering and binding up reports. Decided I wanted to get involved in the creation of that, pull out the data, try and find insights. Spent a long time working under the business umbrella to really that early data analytic activity where you were trying to dig through all the different systems of data and try and find specific information and insights that would be useful for business decisions. Eventually, got into the process of automation and trying to make that more efficient and storage of data, manipulation of data, ETL, and then somewhere along the line, they dragged me into leadership, and it was my job then to try and help smooth out all the bumps that came along with those processes, to try and make it easier and faster and more efficient for the folks that were working with me. And then uh, somewhere along the line, they switched me over to IT, and now I'm doing a very similar thing in IT. I am the director of enterprise data management and architecture in IT. We're working very closely with our data science community and our analytic community. And the activity we're really focused on right now is trying to modernize a lot of our tech stack when it comes to our data environment, bring that up into the cloud, um, pick up some new data engineering skill sets along the way, optimize for those workflows that are cloud-based now and using Amazon and Snowflake and Teradata and all these different activities, along with new techniques for data engineering.
It's incredible to have that background in basically analytics for companies when you had to manually install those outcomes and really design this analysis that was being created. Can you talk a little bit about how that has evolved and how you take that perspective and apply it when looking at new software packages like Snowflake? As you're looking at the implementation, what are you considering? What stakeholders are you looking at? What is that process for you?
Yeah, one of the things that I honestly can't be more thankful of is the opportunity to have worked both in the business arena and the IT arena. It gives me a perspective I don't know that I'd be as successful without, in that whenever I come across a vendor relationship or a new software package, being that my job now is mainly IT focused, I'm thinking about implementation, I'm thinking about costs, I'm thinking about relationship, I'm thinking about the future of the company, their roadmap. I'm trying to make sure that I'm giving full scope to the technical foundation that this company is based on and their partnership with us. But on the same note, then I get to turn it around and say, okay, how would I have felt using this software? Is this something that I can connect with? Is this a tool that I'm going to want to connect with? Is this one of those tools that is a great implementation and very efficient, but when you come back to the actual time to use it, you're sitting there looking at this screen going, wait a minute, where's my export to Excel button? But the reality is it gave me an opportunity to sit down and kind of put on a different hat while I'm talking to these folks, listen to their description of how they really take the user experience and whether or not they're thinking about that, or whether these are tools that are more aligned for efficiency and stability than they are for usage.
That's incredible. I think having that perspective is invaluable, and knowing what is going to be used in the actual activities and how it's going to be applied is inherently invaluable as well. Can you talk a little bit about the actual selection of the software? Are you involved in that, or is it something more you're involved in the implementation of that software once it's been chosen?
Yeah. So right now we're going through and we're trying to build our own platform in the cloud, like I mentioned. Basically, this is it's a greenfield build. So we are trying to set up the roles, the procedures. We're hand selecting the software partners that we're working with and the platform that we're working with. And I get involved very, very early on in the introductions to the companies, like I mentioned, with their technical roadmaps and their future state. Get a good peek at the companies themselves and start up the relationship. And then I have managers that work with me and architects and engineers that I trust quite a bit, that we get them into the room and they go through and they dig through some of the technical requirements behind these companies. They ask them all sorts of questions that probably are way above my head when it comes down to it. Then we kind of come back together to really analyze as a group and decide, where does this fit in our landscape? Oftentimes we have to reach out to other areas of the company, like our enterprise architecture team, who focuses, more long scale into the future, to really understand, okay, where does a company like this fit within Mutual's environment? How does it fit within our growth strategy and what we're trying to do? It's not uncommon for, at the same time that we're getting our managers involved, we're also getting our business partners and leaders involved, to have them go through and ask questions at the same time. Like I said, from their own perspective, it's a very unique perspective. They have just as much interest in the partners that we sign up with. And that kind of turns into the process where we're doing just a little bit of back and forth with those companies. I don't know how deep you want me to get into it. Eventually we get into kind of the whole legal and contracting and get through that. Then we do kind of get into the implementation phase. And that's another chapter in my area's book, where now we've got the companies selected, we've got the contracts in place. Now we pivot and we start working with those companies directly to set up an implementation plan, make sure we understand how to administer the software, the platform. We're getting a lot of our architects and engineers really deep in the weeds at that point in time with these companies directly.
I would love for you to go into your thought process and the different tools and frameworks that you use for the implementation process. At this point in the class, we've talked about kind of the overarching thought process, whether you're doing a big bang implementation where you're turning off one and turning on the other, or parallel, those kinds of concepts, which one makes the most sense for the business case, and then also kind of the stages of the implementation process. I'd love for any thoughts you have on that.
Yeah, that's a fun one, because literally that was just the call I got off of. I have a high level engineer I was working through, and we're talking about transitioning from one data platform to another. We got a very heavily used, heavily relied on data platform that a lot of our analytic data is currently on, and we're trying to transition to a different one into the cloud. And the idea of, okay, do we keep them running parallel? Do we turn them on and off at the same time? Do we take advantage of the activity of the new company as we're transitioning this tool and use their migration services? I wish I had a bulletproof, this is the pattern we use every single time for every single, but the reality is it really depends on the criticality of the systems that are on it, the processes that run against those systems, especially in a data environment, which is what we are. We're looking at some of these systems as, okay, some of these provide financial reporting or regulatory reporting that we have to produce on a regular basis, and we can't interrupt those at all. Others of these are more, maybe they're marketing reports, or maybe they're product development reports, where we have a little bit of leeway. If they don't run that day, nobody stops getting paid. It can catch up tomorrow. The criticality of the systems and what's on them helps us determine the path we take. And since we're a fairly, I would say, since we're a fairly safe company when it comes to the stability of our systems and our data products, we tend to leverage more of that parallel, where we bring the process up, the new process, we make sure it's running, we transition over the systems and the data and the tools over to it. We can run them parallel for a short period of time, let people run their A and B testing, and then when we're ready, we take the old one down. Even then, we still keep it in the background for a while for archival purposes, to make sure if there's any fallover or rollbacks that we need, we can still do that. That's, in most cases, probably our most tried and true path on these type of system and process changes.
I think that is very powerful. One thing, there's two things I'd like to circle back around. And before I forget, One is, how does that selection process work for a vendor? Right? Are you involved in that? And if so, how do you find them? Are you doing the research, or are they coming to you? And then the second thing is, when it comes to the implementation process, what is the post implementation that you go through as you leave that? Because I think that is going to be similar for no matter what kind of wherever it touches, you're going to want to make sure whatever outcome you were trying to get, that you reached it.
Yep. Your selection process, see if I remember the question exactly here. Your selection process, and going into that, generally we have a period of time where we're running proof of concepts with different companies. We'll bring in 5 or 6 different companies. We'll narrow it down to a scope of maybe 3 or 4 that we're really interested in partnering with. We'll give them proof of concepts, or give them a chance to demonstrate to us how they would handle this. And in those cases, they're a lot of these are written and theoretical. They're not actually building stuff for us. They're kind of sending back notes on, here's how we would handle this. Here's the type of activity we'd bring forward. Here's what our tool can do. Here's what our tool can't do. And in those cases, we get a chance to really take a look at how well the platform or system might theoretically work for us. That I believe was the selection.
Is that a request for proposal? Are you pushing that broad?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
then they're coming to you based on, where are you posting that request for proposal? I guess I'm kind of curious how they find you.
It can be. It isn't always a request for a proposal. Again, it kind of depends on the system and the tools and the process that we're using. But we do use the request for proposal process quite a bit in vendor selection. Where we get the vendors from, it really kind of depends. I know a lot of our vendors are met in relationships during conferences where we're out. I got a few coming up this year where we're really interested in hearing what the industry is doing, what others in our arena are doing, making connections with people, and going up to them after their presentation and say, hey, that problem you're having right there, I know about it. What did you do? How did you get about it? Who did you talk to? And they might turn us on to, hey, we were really struggling with this, and we went over here and talked to these folks over here. We'll reach out to them. They will make a connection, and that might start some of that discussion as well. So there are probably quite a few different channels to get your vendors narrowed in on. And at times we do reach out to companies like Gartner and Forrester and some of these other areas that really offer us an insight into that bigger picture industry that we had.
Absolutely. The other question I had was, what is the process post implementation? Very similar, or is it again just dependent on the actual process?
So post implementation is you mean shutting the old systems down, or are you talking more vendor relationship?
No, so you mentioned that the process for implementation is different for every type of implementation. It really depends on the dependencies that really decide the process. But my thought was, the post process, what happens after it's actually implemented, the review of the outcomes, is that
Yeah.
similar, or is there something that is dependency on the type of, like, does it change every time, or is it similar?
No, that one tends to be a little bit more tried and true. We often like to monitor and really watch metrics on, did we get the outcome we were expecting? We do consistent reviews of the implementation itself, and see, are there any things we could learn? What happened well? What didn't happen well? We'll review the timelines and whether or not we met them effectively, or things like that. Is that kind of what you're aiming at?
Yeah, no, that's perfect. And then as you're looking kind of long term, and then you're looking at the different software packages that you're using, how do you decide whether or not it's time to switch something up? Are you tying it to KPIs or key indicators? How do you know that you're not getting what you want out of that software anymore? What are the kind of the thought process behind that?
A lot of them are tied to our business goals. So the one interesting thing about what we do is business moves at the speed of light. They need to be able to respond and react quickly. They're changing. The pandemic changed quite a bit and made us adjust really, really, really fast. So in many instances, it's those type of business events or business changes or desires to change that indicate it's time to modernize. Sometimes we'll go out to the vendors that we're working with and say, hey, this is the challenge we're up against. This is what we're trying to do here. What changes are coming in your roadmap that make this usable for us, that allow us to stay with this existing software? And if they don't have a good answer to that, that kind of sends us on the hunt then and say, okay, we have to respond to this business challenge. This is where our company's going. We're going to look for a different pattern.
Brilliant. Well, I really appreciate you taking some time out of your busy schedule, Justin. Is there anything else that you would recommend or want to cover before we end our conversation?
No, I was excited for the opportunity. I think it's a very interesting topic. I hope I gave good enough answers and was concise enough here.
Absolutely. And if our students would like to reach out to you, is there a way they can easily reach you?
Yeah, my email, justin.ayers@mutualofomaha.com.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again so much. I do truly appreciate it. And I look forward to hopefully seeing you again in the future at some point.
All right, appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Have a good one.
You too.